The afternoon sun filtered through my apartment windows, casting long shadows across the textbooks scattered on my coffee table. The bruises on my forearms throbbed with each heartbeat, hidden beneath my long-sleeved sweater despite the warm weather. 3 months ago, my parents had hired Dr. Peterson to help me with organic chemistry after I'd struggled in my first semester of pre-med. My name is Maya. I'm 18 and a college freshman. This is the story of how I escaped my nightmare and reclaimed my voice. Dr. Peterson's reputation preceded him: Harvard PhD, published researcher, private tutor to the children of senators and CEOs. When he agreed to take me on, my parents practically glowed with pride. "This is your chance to prove you belong in medical school," my father had said, writing the substantial check for Peterson's services. What they didn't know was that behind his polished exterior lurked a predator who fed on young women's insecurities. The sessions had started normally reviewing molecular structures, discussing reaction mechanisms, but gradually, his critiques became personal attacks. His praise came with uncomfortable touches. His teaching methods involved screaming until I cried. "You're late again," Peterson said as he entered my apartment, using the spare key my parents had given him. His gray hair was perfectly styled, his expensive suit pressed and immaculate. To anyone watching, he looked like exactly what he claimed to be: a distinguished educator helping a struggling student. "I was reviewing yesterday's material," I said quietly, gesturing to my open notebooks. The pages were covered in meticulous notes, color-coded and organized exactly how he'd demanded. Nothing was ever good enough for him, but I kept trying. He glanced at my work dismissively: sloppy handwriting, incomplete analysis. "Do you even want to be a doctor, or are you just wasting your parents' money?" His voice carried that familiar edge that made my stomach clench with anticipation of what was coming. "I'm trying my best," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "Your best?" He laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Maya, your best wouldn't qualify you to work at a veterinary clinic, let alone treat human patients. You're fundamentally lacking the intelligence required for medical school." The words hit like physical blows. Over the past months, I'd begun to believe him. My grades had actually improved under his tutelage, but he never acknowledged progress, only failures. He'd convinced me that without his help, I was destined to flunk out. "Let's start with today's lesson," he said, moving his chair closer to mine than necessary, "and try to keep up this time. I don't have patience for your usual stupidity." As he leaned over to point at something in my textbook, his hand accidentally brushed against my thigh. When I shifted away, he grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave marks. "Pay attention when I'm speaking to you," he hissed. "The only reason you're not completely hopeless is because I'm teaching you. Without me, you're nothing." That's when Mrs. Chun's text arrived, lighting up my phone screen. Through the thin walls of my apartment complex, she'd heard Peterson's escalating voice during our sessions for weeks. I'd always made excuses when she asked about the noise, claimed it was television or study groups. "Who's texting you during our session?" Peterson's grip on my wrist tightened. "Give me that phone." "It's just my neighbor," I said, trying to pull away. She heard shouting and what? "You think you're gonna run crying to some old woman?" His face contorted with rage. "Maya, let me make something very clear. If you ever tell anyone about our session, about my teaching methods, I will destroy your academic future. I have connections at every medical school in the country. One word from me, and you'll never be accepted anywhere." But something in Mrs. Chun's text had awakened something in me. For months, I'd felt isolated and alone, convinced that Peterson's treatment of me was somehow normal or deserved. Seeing concern from someone outside this toxic bubble reminded me that what was happening wasn't okay. "You can't threaten me," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "This isn't teaching. This is abuse." His grip became painful. "Abuse? You privileged little princess. You have no idea what real abuse looks like. I'm trying to toughen you up. prepare you for the real world. Medical school will eat you alive if you can't handle a little criticism." "Criticism doesn't leave bruises," I said, looking pointedly at his hand on my wrist. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe even fear. In all our sessions, I'd never pushed back before. I'd always apologized, tried harder, absorbed his cruelty like it was constructive feedback. "You ungrateful!" He raised his other hand, and for a terrifying second, I thought he was going to strike me. But then voices in the hallway made him freeze. Mrs. Chun was talking to another neighbor, their conversation clearly audible through my thin front door. Peterson released my wrist abruptly and stepped back, smoothing his tie and adjusting his demeanor like flipping a switch. "I think we should end today's session early," he said in his public voice, calm, professional, concerned. "You seem distracted." After he left, I sat on my couch staring at the red marks on my wrist, feeling something crack open inside my chest. Not breaking, opening, like I'd been holding my breath for 3 months and finally remembered how to exhale. I walked to my bathroom mirror and really looked at myself for the first time in weeks. The confident, curious person who'd started college had been replaced by someone hollow-eyed and anxious. Peterson hadn't just been teaching me chemistry, he'd been systematically destroying my self-worth. My phone buzzed with another text from Mrs. Chun. "Maya dear, I have some fresh dumplings if you'd like company. My door's always open." For reasons I couldn't fully articulate, I found myself knocking on Mrs. Chun's apartment door 10 minutes later. She took one look at my face and ushered me inside, leading me to her cozy kitchen table without asking any questions. "Eat," she said simply, placing a steaming plate in front of me. "Then tell me what's been troubling you, child." The kindness in her voice broke something loose in my throat. Before I could stop myself, words were pouring out about Peterson's cruelty, his threats, the way he'd convinced me I was stupid and worthless, about how isolated I'd felt, how afraid I'd become of my own thoughts. Mrs. Chun listened without interrupting, her weathered hands folded calmly on the table. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Maya," she said finally, "I've lived 73 years, and I've learned that people who tear others down do so because they're broken inside themselves. Strong teachers build students up. They don't destroy them." "But he's so accomplished," I said. "Harvard PhD, published researcher. My parents think he's helping me." "Education doesn't make someone a good person," Mrs. Chun replied firmly. "And fear is not a teaching tool. What you're describing isn't instruction, it's psychological abuse. And from what I can see on your arms, it's not just psychological." I looked down at the marks on my wrists, still visible, despite my attempts to hide them. "We need to document this," Mrs. Chun continued, standing up with surprising energy, "and we need to report it. But first, you need to understand something. None of this is your fault. You are not stupid or worthless or any of the things he's told you. You are a strong, intelligent young woman who deserves to be treated with respect." Over the next hour, Mrs. Chun helped me photograph the bruises, write down everything I could remember about Peterson's behavior, and research my options for reporting him. It turned out that Mrs. Chun had been a social worker for 40 years before retirement. She knew exactly what steps to take. "The university has a Title IX office," she explained, showing me the website on her tablet. "Private tutors who work with students can be reported there, and we should file a police report for the physical abuse." "But what if he destroys my academic future like he threatened?" I asked, the old fear creeping back in. Mrs. Chun fixed me with a steady gaze. "Maya, a man who abuses students doesn't have legitimate connections that matter. He has a reputation to protect. The moment this comes to light, any influence he claims to have evaporates. Abusers rely on their victims staying silent." That evening, we went to the police station together. The officer who took my report was professional and thorough. explaining that they'd had complaints about Dr. Peterson before, but previous victims had been too scared to follow through with formal statements. "You're very brave for coming forward," Officer Martinez told me. "With your testimony and evidence, we finally have enough to pursue charges." The next few days were a whirlwind. The university launched an investigation. Other students came forward with similar stories about Peterson's abusive behavior. My parents were shocked and horrified when they learned what their distinguished tutor had been doing to me. "Why didn't you tell us?" my mother asked, tears streaming down her face as she examined the faded bruises on my arms. "Because I thought it was my fault," I admitted. "He convinced me I was stupid and that this was normal, that I deserved it for not being smart enough." The hardest part was facing how completely Peterson had manipulated my sense of reality. When I reviewed my actual academic performance, I realized my grades had improved significantly. My professors described me as bright and dedicated. The failures Peterson constantly berated me for were actually normal parts of learning. 2 weeks later, Dr. Peterson was arrested at his home. The police found evidence of inappropriate relationships with multiple students, financial fraud, and a pattern of psychological abuse spanning years. His Harvard PhD turned out to be from a diploma mill. His published research was plagiarized. Everything about his professional identity was a carefully constructed lie. During the trial, 12 other students testified about their experiences with Peterson. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in prison and ordered him to pay restitution to all his victims. "You saved a lot of people," Officer Martinez told me after the sentencing. "Your courage to speak up prevented him from hurting others." But the real transformation happened in the months that followed. With the help of a therapist and genuine tutoring support, I rebuilt my confidence and rediscovered my love of learning. Mrs. Chun became like a grandmother to me, celebrating every small victory as I reclaimed my academic goals. By my sophomore year, I was thriving in my pre-med courses, not because someone was terrorizing me into performance, but because I genuinely loved the material and had supportive teachers who believed in my potential. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Mrs. Chun hadn't texted that day, if she hadn't offered me dumplings and a safe space to finally speak the truth. Peterson had isolated me so completely that I'd forgotten other people could be kind without ulterior motives. Now, as I prepare for medical school applications, I'm not the frightened, broken person Peterson tried to create. I'm exactly who I was meant to be, someone strong enough to help others the way Mrs. Chun helped me. Someone who knows that education should lift people up, never tear them down. The best revenge against an abuser isn't silence or shame, it's thriving in spite of them, and making sure they can never hurt anyone else. Peterson stole 3 months of my life, but he couldn't steal my future. That belongs to me, and I'm not giving it away to anyone ever again.